We need to take you up to the office with us, and I had some questions for you. I have another investigator who wants to talk to you.
About what?
This is Mark Douglas Burns at his front door in Ogden.
What is this about?
Acting confused as he confronts officers who had been looking for the Clearfield Rapist for decades.
I remember probably almost every detail about this case because some cases sit with you in your heart, some in your mind. This one was both.
The victims were at least 11 random women in Utah and Wyoming from 1991 to 2001. The youngest survivor was 11 years old.
I do carry some burdens, and that's one of them. We thought we had a serial killer in Rock Springs. We didn't know we had a serial rapist. We didn't know we had a serial rapist.
Do you want to restate that part?
Well, yes. That's just, like, I don't know why killer came out. There might be there could be a reason, actually.
The reason is because Mark Burns eventually started to talk.
Why on earth would they send somebody from SWAT for me?
Now confessing to unsolved murder cases in Arizona, Wyoming, and Oregon. Law enforcement agencies across the country now believe the serial rape suspect being held in Davis County is also a serial killer. And when he met with us, he said the same thing, calling himself a sexual deviant, a predator who had a compulsion that was irresistible.
The monster inside had to come out. Do I feel bad for Mark? No. Do I feel bad for the victims? Yeah, absolutely.
This man used to be Mark Burns' boss for a short time at a trucking company in Brigham City. He says one day, Burns quit to work for a different company across the street.
He seemed to want to go up the northwest, and our neighbor up the road is the one that runs those routes.
Did he say why he liked those routes?
You know, he never did. He wanted to go that direction. That's where he wanted to travel.
Microfilm documents archived in the 70s show before Mark Burns was a truck driver, he was a Marine and a convicted rapist who was supposed to die in a gas chamber on May 3rd, 1974. He folded up a small piece of paper to jam the lock at a McDonald's restroom in Jacksonville, North Carolina. He waited for someone to walk through, followed her in as she struggled with the door, and then raped her at knife point while her husband ate in the dining room.
Lethal gas. May God have mercy on his soul. If he was convicted, how come they didn't keep him?
The question is difficult to answer because 45 years later, the attorneys and judges involved in the case are now dead. But in 1975, the laws in North Carolina changed. Death sentences were supposed to be reduced, but only for rapists who committed their crime after April 1974. Mark Burns' case was in January 74, but still a judge made an exception, resentencing him to 25 to 30 years. The documents do not state why this judge ignored the guidelines of a new law that should have still kept Mark Burns in the gas chamber.
Somebody that's that heinous a crime, I've always been in favor of capital punishment.
I'm not the biggest fan of it, but if I was a parent, especially of one of the children who was raped by him, I might feel a lot differently, because then your mother bear comes out and get out of the way.
The day Mark Burns' death sentence was vacated, attorneys say they could not reach the 18-year-old victim, and she did not attend court that day. Today, she would be about 63 years old, but we also have not been able to reach her. When we asked Mark Burns what happened, he said he believes it was an agreement between prosecutors and his defense attorney at the time.
This is such a long string of crimes, the trail that he left behind, Adam. What happens next now that he's confessing?
Yeah, well, he told me that his goal is to receive the death penalty. He's in the process right now of changing his plea from not guilty to guilty because he wants to receive that death penalty. He says he doesn't want a plea deal. He just wants to die because it's the only thing he has left to give his victims. Wow. We did have an interview with him yesterday. We were not allowed to record it. So the next step for us is to get a copy of that video from the jail, and we will be doing a follow-up story.
Because they recorded it for you, correct?
Correct.
Now, is there any guarantee that in pleading guilty, he will in fact be sentenced to death?
No, because his cases here in Utah are all rape cases. The homicides were in other states, so he's now waiting to be charged in those cases. He hasn't even faced those charges yet, so he's hoping that either Oregon, Arizona, or Wyoming will give him capital punishment.
Mark Douglas Burns, dubbed the Clearfield Rapist, has been convicted of 17 felony charges in Utah.
Police say he raped 11 women from 1991 to 2001, but the case went cold for years. Now he will likely spend the rest of his life in prison.
Today was on a scale of 1 to 10, a 9. And the day that he is sentenced for our victims and for this community in our office will be a 10.
The day's finally come, and now he's going to be sitting in jail until he's dead.
You want to follow it through to the end. It's part of our closure as well.
Hey, good afternoon, Mark. How are you doing? You hear me?
I'm well, Adam. Yourself?
Do you get a lot of visitors?
No, you're the only ones I've ever gotten.
His name is Mark Douglas Burns, but for years, when police were trying to figure out who he was, their cold case suspect was only known as the Clearfield Rapist.
Adam, what a break in the case.
We have a suspect now for the first time in almost 30 years. They were able to get this guy by looking at his DNA. Police say this man would often blindfold his victims and then forcibly rape them. The details are very, very disturbing. He lived an undercover life in Ogden as a truck driver. Before that, he beat death row, the gas chamber in North Carolina, for another rape he committed in 1974. In that case, he targeted a woman in a McDonald's restroom.
All right, well, let's see where this goes then.
These interviews you're about to see took place in February 2020. We're only releasing this series now because his confessions to Fox 13 were used as part of an ongoing investigation into new crimes that he had never been linked to before.
I definitely regret everything that I've done. I mean, those people did absolutely nothing to me. They did not deserve what I did to them. If I could take it back, I certainly would, but I can't. Possibly being executed for those murders is the only sense of justice that I can give them.
You were on death row in the past. Do you want to be on death row?
I would rather be executed than spend the rest of my life in prison.
Mark Burns is still facing a murder charge based on a case in Evanston, Wyoming, and has confessed to 2 other homicides, one in Oregon and one in Arizona.
All 3 of the homicides were totally by accident. None of them were planned. The one in Wyoming that they're going to talk about was actually the only female victim, and that one was just a total mistake. My bad, total. She had nothing to do with it. I mean, she did nothing wrong. Totally my bad. It was just a situation that just went to instantly, and I chose the wrong way to handle it.
Do you object to being called a serial killer?
I don't know. I mean, if that's what it is, then that's what it is. It doesn't, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't. If that's what I am, then that's what I am.
The Clearfield Rapist will never have to face his murder victims, but earlier this year he said it was uncomfortable to face the women he raped.
I would ask the court, show me no mercy.
He robbed me of my virginity, safety, and sleep. Since that traumatic night, I have never again slept through the night, ever. The bravest thing I ever did was continuing my life when I wanted to die. He gave me a life sentence, but he himself was free to live his life.
His youngest victim was 11 years old, but she grew up strong.
So this was just 19 months before I was taken. This is my mom and me. That's a great feeling, never to have to look over my shoulder again.
How did you pick your victims?
I didn't pick them, just whoever left their door unlocked.
Why?
I don't know. I had a compulsion that was irresistible. On the one hand, it was a hunger that was unquenchable, unsatisfiable. But then on the other hand, it fed me. It made me feel complete. I never experienced love. I don't know, maybe these crimes was just some way of me actually being able to present my whole entire complete self as a human being to another person whether they wanted it or not. Obviously, I would rather be free than spend the rest of my life in prison. But on the other hand, I've had a great weight lifted off of me because of this now. It gave me the opportunity to provide some closure to my victims. They certainly deserve it.
Do you know how many women you have raped?
I've got a pretty good idea. My memory's not as good as it used to be, but I'm not going to get into that now.
Burns said he has not committed a crime since 2002, when his desire to fulfill his sick need started to fade.
My brain does not function normally. I don't know if it's a chemical imbalance. Maybe I've got an extra Y chromosome. Maybe it's just a loose wire. Up until recently, I've never experienced the feeling of guilt. I do feel regret. I do feel remorse. I do feel sorrow. These are feelings I've never experienced before. I have become what I think is a responsible citizen. I'm a good neighbor. I'm a good friend. I'm a good employee. I think I'm basically a decent human being if it wasn't for the fact that I was also a monster.
Mark Burns is still being investigated for the homicides in Oregon and Arizona. He said he plans to continue confessing and pleading guilty to every crime he has committed. Earlier this year, he was sentenced to 242 years to life for the rapes in Utah. Live in studio, Adam Herbets, Fox 13 News, Utah.
A confessed serial rapist and serial killer from Ogden has avoided the death penalty. Mark Douglas Burns, known as the Clearfield Rapist, was sentenced to life in prison without parole for the 2001 murder of Sue Ellen Gunderson Higgins in Evanston, Wyoming. Her 2-year-old son was taking a nap in the next room when she was killed. Earlier this year, the murder was one of many crimes that Burns confessed to. Fox 13 News investigative reporter Adam Herbets in a series of jailhouse interviews.
She did nothing wrong. It's totally my bad. It was just a situation that just went to instantly, and I chose the wrong way to handle it.
You were on death row in the past. Do you want to be on death row?
I would rather be executed than spend the rest of my life in prison.
4 years after his wife's death, the victim's husband was arrested and falsely accused. Prosecutors eventually dropped all charges but did not know who the killer was until recently. Burns is also serving a sentence of 242 years to life in prison for a series of rapes in Utah.